Hello everyone, I'm Ray from Ray's Crafty Creations, and I'm here today for Riverside Crafts, and we're going to be looking at alcohol markers. These are three of the stamps that I'm going to be using today. So we've got, they're all by Woodware, drawn by Francois Reed, and they are available at the moment in the shop, and they stamp beautifully. So just to give you an idea, so we're going to be looking at how to blend and how to choose your pens to make them work. Okay, so I'm going to start off with just some dwarves to start with, or gnomes actually, aren't they? They're little gnomes. Right, so we're going to start, and I'm going to do with skin tone first. Now, one of the first things you need to know is all alcohol markers work in the same way. They have an ink, a colour, and then the alcohol. They will work together as well, so different brands will work together. I have a real mix of pens, from Copics right the way through Pro Markers and Spectrum Noir, and the Spectrum Illustrators, and then I've got some of the really cheapy ones as well, because I've seen a colour I like, so I've picked that up. So there are all sorts out there, and they all work the same, and it's basically what fits your pocket and what sort of nib you like. I tend to like a bullet nib. Some people prefer a brush, and it's best to try them out yourself to work that one out. But when you're doing any colouring, you're going to start off with three colours. A light, a medium and a dark for whatever area it is you're going to be colouring into. If you don't have three in those colours, then you can substitute a grey to help work it in, but you need to be a warm grey or a cool grey depending on your colours, because if you use the wrong type of grey it will just look muddy. Okay, but that's something you can practice and find out. So I'm going to start off with my lightest, and I'm going to colour the noses in, so they're all going in the same at the moment. Just putting the ink down. One of the nice things about alcohol markers is if your phone goes or the doorbell goes and the ink dries, you can still go back in and work it. When you put a pen back down and put alcohol back on it, it will work. So don't suddenly think, oh, that isn't going to be any good to me. So I hope you're all there and got somebody answering any questions that come up, because as usual my phone is upside down so I can't really see. So I colour the whole thing with my palette, and then I'm doing sort of about half on their noses in my mid-tone. Now I'm going to go in with my dark, and I'm only going to do about a quarter of their nose in the dark, and that's just really to give me this idea of shadow. But I'm also going to come down on this side here to give it that sort of a rosy nose that you tend to look for. Okay, and I'm going to go back in with my lightest, and I'm going to go over everything that's on there. So I'm just going to blend it in using my lightest pen, and that's going to give us all of them in. And it'll just move them in so they look nice and sort of part of the same thing. You don't get lines as such when you do this. As you can see, I'm working in circles. I do that on everything except for fur or hair. Now, as you can probably see, you've now got a little bit of a rosy nose with some shadow on it. Okay, I'm now going to just do their hands. Okay, we're looking good here. I hope you've been enjoying the sunshine we've had this week. It's been lovely and warm, hasn't it? We've just got a nice little bit of warmth today, not too much sun, so it's a bit cooler, which is nice. A little bit hot earlier in the week, especially for my new granddaughter. She found it a little bit too hot. Right, so I've done my skin tones. I'm going to do a beard. Now, when I'm selecting colours, I tend to go for miss a colour out. So I'll do sort of like one 3 and 5, or I'll do 2, 3, 4 and 6. So I'll miss one out if they're numbered. So it just gives you a bit more difference to get your shading in. If they're too close in colour, you don't get your shading doesn't really do the same thing. You need that sort of variation. So I'm just going to put some grey down on this one. I'm using a warm grey because it's sort of a nice sort of tone for this and that, but it's more for what I've got. It's got a slight browny edge, the warm greys do. Normally, if you're having an ice grey, they will be a blue grey. Then you get green greys and the blue greys, and that. So you sort of choose which way around it is you're going to go, and what works for you. Now I'm putting the shadow. One of the nice things about these stamps is they've dots where they've sort of given you an idea of where shadow will be. So you've got somewhere to put it to give you your shadow for when you're doing it. So it's quite nice. They've given you an idea. You're not trying to guess which way around I should have shadow. They've already done it for you, which makes life a bit more easier to work it out. Okay, so you can see I've got my greys are quite dark there on top of it at the moment. So I'm going to go in with my blending pen, my palest one again, and I'm doing some circles over everything I've done. Okay, so I'm going to go over all of the bits I've just put on, and I'm going to blend them out, going in circles again. You can hear it squeaking on the card. Now, talking about card, I do use a specific cardstock. I use Nina Solar White because it does need to be a super smooth, low chalk content card for using alcohol markers, because otherwise the card will act like a blotting paper and it will suck your ink out for you, and you'll end up with not so much. So there you can see his beard is colouring quite nicely. All right, so I'm going to do another beard just so you can see while I'm doing it, so you can watch it again just to help, because it does help more watch it. And that when I do, there are some colouring tutorials on the YouTube channel and bits, so it's worth having a look because we have put some up before, doing different things. If you're not sure about your blending at the moment, when you first start, put down do it smaller amounts. So do little sort of dots of it rather than doing a big swathe of colour. Sort of dot it in so that it's sort of less obvious where you've put it. So you can sort of it will disappear easier. You've got a ragged edge rather than it being a definite line. Just helps a bit more. Okay, so we've got the nice shadow under his hat. Okay, right. I'm just going to do a hat, and I'm going to do it in red. But when I do hats, I tend to use a grey. When I use a red, I use a grey as my other colour to help blend it out, because I find that otherwise I end up with the reds tend to go aren't different enough in colour. They go a bit brown if you're not careful. So I tend to use a grey to help me with my shadow. One of the other things that you need to know about red is your least friendly of pigments. So if you get red over where you want it, it will stain the card. They're not as easy to move. So taking a red pen is something you do when you're starting your blending. Use red last because it's just a bit more difficult to get where you want it to be. Okay, I've got my grey there, and I'm just going to go over it, and it's just going to give me a bit of toning. Okay, so I've now got a nice bright red hat. Right, we're going to colour the heart in a different sort of red, so we've got this variation between them, so they look slightly different. Okay, Now I'm going to do the bottom half of him. I'm going to do it in a green, but I'm going to start off with a very bright green, and then I'm going to add in some of the others to help shade it down. So I've got quite a bright green going on at the moment. And again, there are dots where your shadows are going to be, which help quite a lot again. So you've got some obvious areas where it's going to be darker for you to help with you work out where you're going to be putting your darker colours to help with the shadowing. If you don't have lots of colours in your set yet, you can do most of your shading with the greys by adding it in, which helps quite a lot. Okay, so now I've got a little bit of shading, so now you can see my shading. Okay, you can see how it's dried around his beard here to give me my shadow. I've got this here on my hat, and you wouldn't know that was grey going on there. And then I've got my different greens to help me darken off my green. Okay, I'm just going to do his hat here in a different colour. I'm going to use some blues because that will help you see how the blues sort of work together. No, it's not the one I wanted. Can't find the blue I want now. It's always the same, isn't it? And then a nice, not that one, not that one, that's too dark. That one. Right. I'm only going to use a couple of blues because I don't have the right colour blue that I was looking for. It's going to take too long to find it today. And I'm doing this. I should have got it out and I forgot. Now the other end of these is a chisel nib, which is the only time I use a chisel nib is if I'm colouring in a large area, because they're not so easy to use as the bullet is. I'll just put my blue, darker blue in for my shadowing bits. There's a little bit of shadow up there. Again, I'm going to blend it down. So I have a blue hat, and he can have a red patch, can't he? Let's give him a red patch. Oh no, we'll give him a different colour. He's got a red heart on it, so we're going to give him a purple patch on his hat. And we'll do him his red heart. And we can give this one a blue patch. There we go. And he's going to have red trousers and a red jumper. Now, if you go over into a bit you don't want, you can either use the colour that you've gone over onto and you colour next to it, and it will help push that colour back where you want it to be. Or if you go over, you can do it with a blender pen, which I'll show you on him in just a moment. Okay, so we've now got two of them coloured. We're just going to do his hat. We're going to do his hat in the bright green, but I'm going to go over because I want to show you how we can do, if I've got a colour and I get it in the wrong place, how we can pull it back. So we've got a bright green hat today. Right, just so you can see. We've got green here. We're going to go over into the patch, which I shouldn't have done because you don't want that to be green. A little bit of the other green here just to darken it off, and then I'm going to show you how I move the colour when I've got it in the wrong place. Right, so I'm going to blend out the bits that I want to be blended out to help it have some shape in my hat. Now, if you can see, I've got the green here. Now with a blender pen, what you do is you colour from where it starts and just keep going close, colour towards the line. And what gradually happens is you push that ink back in. If you go straight on top of it, it won't work. You need to be working towards where you want that ink to go. And then it will erase it for you as such. So that it will go back to where you were. So now you haven't got that colour in that gap. Alright, we can put a different colour in there, can't we? We shall do him a bluey patch. And I can just go in now and put the blue in place. So it's got his blue patch. Alright, so that's quite a nice way of colouring in your little gnomes. I'm just going to show you how I do the mushrooms, just because it's a nice way of showing you how things blend, especially when you're using lots of colours to do the different areas. Okay, and I've got some purples somewhere. I could get purples out. Here we go. Right, I'm going to colour this mushroom in at the moment, okay, which I've done previously. So I'm going to start with my purpley colour here. All right, I'm colouring him in. And we go up to here with purple. Right, now I'm going to put some dark purple down where I'm going to have shadow. Okay, and I'm going to use a different technique for blending this one, because it's not, I haven't got a colour in the middle of it. I'm going to pick up the colour off of on the paler pen and from the darker nib, and I'm just going to go in and it will give me my mid-tone, okay, to help blend those in and give me a bit more of a richer colour as I'm coming out. Okay, I'm going to do the same at the top. So I'm going to put my darker one in to start with. Okay, we're going to go down around this bit here. Now it doesn't damage the nib of your pen at all, because as you work, the other colour flows in, so it isn't a problem. It won't give you change the colour of the ink completely all the time. So it's not an issue to do it at all. Okay, so that's giving me my shadow there quite nicely. Right, I'm just going to put myself some green again. I'm going to go in here with this bright green. And as you can see, the shadow is along this side quite a lot here. So I'm going to go with the darker green, and I'm going to put quite a bit in of shadow. Okay, I'll put my shadow in. And I'm going to use my dark grey just to put a little bit more shadow up there. Okay. And I'm going to use it as well into my purple for a minute. Okay, right, I'm going to go back in with my pale green rather, and go over everything. Okay, so give me my nice bright colour there. A bit of yellow. Let's go for a fairly bright yellow. This one, that's nice and bright there. And I've got a rich one, which will give me the idea of some shadow again. Again, I'm going to go in with my grey, because I want it to look like the shadow is coming off of that butterfly fairly similarly on all the spaces. Okay, and I'm going to go back in again now with my pale one and go over it all. Okay. So now I've got a really nice shadow here on the side of my mushroom. Okay, which helps give it a really good shape. And I'm going to do the underneath of my mushroom now, in here. Okay, and I'm going to start off with a light sort of beigey colour to help me sort of give me a beige, a base tone. And I'm going to do my stalk similarly. And again, you can see on here that you've got a really nice symbols of where your grey, where your dark colours are going to be and where your shadow is, which helps quite a lot. And you can sort of do your shadowing coming in, and we can do a bit more, make it a little bit darker right at the top, so we've got this real definite edge there. If you think it's not dark enough, you can go in again with a darker one. All you got to remember is at the moment it's against white, and that makes everything look very stark when you first start. So it's quite a different feeling once you've got more stuff coloured in. More often than not, the same colours that you use to do flesh tones will work for sort of like the underneath of mushrooms, the underneath of animals and things, because they are that sort of a skin tony light beige colour, so they will work quite well for that for you. Okay, I'm going to do this mushroom red. I'm just going to take my time to go around my edges so that I don't end up hopefully over colouring where I don't want to. And I'm going to be careful going around these circles as well, so I really don't want red in them if I can help it. Now if I do get red in them, I use a white gel pen to hide it, because you can't really, or a little blob of white acrylic, because as I said before, red isn't really a colour you can erase. It sort of hangs around and changes tone, but it's still there. It stains the paper stock quite definitely. Now if you've got a really narrow bit to try and get past, rather than actually sort of pressing down, just dot your pen gently around it, and you'll get through that gap. Whereas if you put the nib down completely, you'll probably find that your nib is wider than the gap that you're trying to get through. So just, especially on a lot of stamps, because they're very tiny imprecision gaps, so sometimes it's just, it looks like you couldn't do it, but you just gently dot it, because you'll get a, if you look, when I put my nib down, I get a nice big splodge. If I dot it, I can get really tiny lines. Okay, that's my nib there, that's how wide it is, but that's when I dot it, so you get a big difference in what you're doing for the width. So as you play with it, you'll gradually get to feel your pens and how they work. Now you must make sure your lids go back on them and they click in place. They will all have a click when they're in the right place. One of the things that I will say is that if you don't put your lids on, alcohol markers will fall apart and they will dry up and they won't do anything for you. So one of your best thing to do is actually get yourself, make sure that you've got the lids on. Always check them before you put them away. And if you do that, they will last you a very long time. The set I've got out today, were the first set I ever purchased, and most of these pens are my originals, and I have had them for good 12 plus years. So they are an investment because they're not cheap, but once you've got them for a very long time. which helps. So now you can see how the mushrooms are colouring in quite nicely. I'm just going to go back to do the skin tone again on his nose, just to help you, remind you. Palest colour first. Mid-tone. I'm going to go down the side and across underneath his hat, because we want it to look like he's got a nice sort of bit of sunburn on his nose. Okay, so we're doing it like so. Back in with the lightest again and give it all a really good colour over with the going in circular motions, and that will give you a really cute looking sort of bit. We're going to put some grass bits in. Okay, some here. Colouring is very good. It's very mindful. It helps you to forget what's happening outside in the world. It's a good way of sort of getting rid of all that angst, because you just concentrate on what you're doing and forget the rest of the world. Now, let's do his beard quickly. Must be greys. I'm going to have a bit more of a grey beard by comparison to the other ones, because I'm going to go a little bit darker with his beard. Now you can use your blender pen to give texture, so I'm going to show you how I do that as well in a moment, because I think that would be a nice thing to do. We're going to give his beard some texture when we've done it, so it looks like it's sort of quite fluffy and curly probably, which is a little different. So we get all the blending done first. So we've got the shading on our beard. And then I'm going to go in with my blender pen, and I want to be, and I'm just going to do little tiny flicks going in different directions on it. And what this will do, it will put a little bit of a texture on his beard and make it look a little bit different to what it does now. It stops it looking quite so flat. I'll show you up the difference in a second from the one I just done and to this one. Okay, now these are the ones that have got a nice smooth beard, and that's the one I've just gone over with the blender pen. You can start to see as it dries, it's now getting like a mottledy finish, so it sort of feels like he's got a bit more of a curly beard rather than it being a nice straight clean finish. So it gives you a different texture. Okay, so I hope this is helping with your how it's going, and I hope you've got lots of questions for me to answer at the end, because I will go through them and check them for you and see where we're at, so that you've got a really sort of cover it for you. We do colouring classes at Riverside, so with a bit of luck, when this weather, when we're all allowed to go out again and we have a bit more freedom, we'll be able to do some nice, to get back and do some classes, which will be lovely. Seems to be a very long time away from everything, which has been quite strange in some ways and quite difficult. I'm sure you're all feeling the same. I bet you all want to come back, do classes and get on with your crafts again. It's very good though that Riverside are open and allowing us to go and spend our pennies, so we can go and find new things to play with, like these beautiful stamps. And I have to say, they've just had the winter Christmas ones come in, and they are beautiful, and I've just ordered a couple because I said I want those. So Caroline's put them by for me when I go shopping this week, because I really think they're beautiful. So right, I'm just gonna give him an orange hat for a change. They're a little bit different. Two players. Done. Right, so he's pretty much finished. There's a few little bits to play with, but in the most part he's coloured in. And I hope you've had fun watching me do some colouring this afternoon. So here are the ones I've just finished, and here is the ones I did. This texture here was done exactly the same way as I showed you on his beard, by colouring it all over and then going in with the blender pen, so that it gave me this sort of mottled background like you'd normally get with your watercolour and that. And the same again here. So I hope it's been informative, and I'll hope to see you again soon. Take care.